Hi there, welcome back to Tiff Reads Books. I'm Tiff and I read books and then I talk to you about them. And we are upstairs today because it is the time of day when everyone is coming home along the road where my office is, and it's a little loud. So we're just gonna sit up here and have this nice white wall that I can put the books that I'm going to be talking about on. I really want to talk about all the books that I read that were just mid and fine, because I feel like most of the time when I talk about a book, I'm like, this one was amazing or this one was terrible. And I never tell you about the books that were just fine and I enjoyed them and they were quick and they were good and then they were done and I didn't think about them again. So everything that didn't irritate me was a 3 to a 3.75. And so some of these, like, they were just shy of like being really good. 3 to 3.5 is like, it's fine. 3.75 is it almost did something that I was like, yes, give me more, but it just barely like missed that. So it still kind of counts as a mid. There are some 3.75s that I think are better than others. And some of these are actually in both Storygraph and Goodreads, the lowest rated 10 books that I read this year, but for me, I didn't rate them that low. So let's start with the 3s here. What we have. All right. So, okay. So some of these are books that I read because they were free on Audible and I was in the lab and I was going to be in the lab for hours. So I needed something to listen to. All right. We have, first off, one that was just, so I picked it because it said the name sounded funny and I have a habit of doing this. If the name is intriguing, I will pick the book. So it's Horribly Haunted in Hillbilly Hollow, and I love an alliteration, so I chose to listen to this one. This book follows it reminded me of a Hallmark movie, to be honest. It follows a young woman who's in her 20s, I believe, maybe late 20s or early 30s. And she gets some sort of brain injury. And I'm laughing about that, but that's not the funny part, okay? She gets some sort of brain injury, and as part of her recovery, her doctor's like, maybe you should go back home where you're in a less pressured job, because she lives in New York, and she's like a marketing or something, you know, one of those Hallmark jobs, okay? So she goes back to her small town in the Ozarks to live with her grandma and grandpa to recover, and she doesn't tell them that she's there to recover from an injury. She just is there. She just tells them she's there to like visit. And she reconnects with her like high school best friend, her 2 high school best friends, and one of them is a man who's now a doctor and he's single, and yeah. So she ends up like rekindling that, like remaking friends, but she sees ghosts. And so of course there's been a murder in this small town and she has to solve it. And it's like someone on the council, the city council or whatever, gets murdered. It was just, it was so afternoon TV that it was just easy, digestible, wasn't offensive, didn't bother me. I will not be listening to more. This is a series called The Ozark. What is it called? The Ozark Ghost Hunter or something like that. Something. Hold on. You gotta. Okay, so it's called The Ozark Ghost Hunter, by Blythe. Blythe Baker is the author. It was just a silly little thing, and I think we can follow that up with another silly little thing that I read called Witchy Whiskers. And this one was also free and it was listed in the cozies, and I picked it up because I was like, all right, another silly little thing. And this one would have been a little bit better had it not been for the voice acting. So in this, we are in a town of witches, and again, this could be an afternoon TV show. So we're in a town of witches, and there's this woman who runs a magical candle shop, and she sells candles that are spells, and she has this guy come in who's like, I know nothing, but I need a gift for my mom. So she like makes him a gift basket. They walk around the store after it's closed and they get to know each other, and she finds out that he's visiting his mom. He used to be from here, but he hasn't been back in forever, and he's visiting his mom. And Then he asks her out on a date, and she's about to say yes, and her ex-husband barges in through the door, and so dude leaves without, you know, them going out to dinner. He says he'll reschedule their date, and then the next morning, her talking cat, which is why I listened to this, because I was like, okay, I love a snarky talking cat. But the voice, like, I wanted Salem from Sabrina, from the old school Sabrina, okay? And instead I got the most pompous, arrogant, annoying voice you could possibly think of, and I couldn't do it anymore. I finished the whole thing, but I was like, oh my god, this cat would actually be saying some really funny, snarky things if it weren't for the voice that the narrator gave the cat. And I just couldn't do it. So the snarky talking cat wakes her up to tell her that the man she was supposed to go on a date with is being accused of murder, and it's all over the papers. So she spends she ends up spending the book trying to figure out who actually killed this person. It's the man's brother. She ends up spending the book trying to figure out who actually killed this guy, and, you know, falling in love with the out-of-town lawyer or whatever he was. He had some sort of high-power job. And while dealing with her ex-husband who wants to be back in her life, and dealing with the fact that her aunt who actually owns the cat is missing. And yeah, so it's introducing, again, a series. And the series is called, I should have had this ready, it's called 9 Lives Magic. Again, I won't be finishing it. The first one was free. It was fine. It honestly, like, all of these, they were fine. There was nothing horribly wrong. I didn't get upset at them. They were just things I don't think about again. Okay, so there's one more silly one, and then the rest are a little more kind of... Okay, so the next one is another Audible special, and it was the first 2 novellas put into one book. And it was called 2 Necromancers, A Beurocrat, and an Army of Golems, an Unconventional Heroes publisher pack. So it was the 2 books put together. I think the second one is like... it's long-ass titles, and I picked it up because it was described as an unconventional necromancer. And so he's a necromancer that instead of robes and stuff, he wears like jeans and metal band t-shirts. And his whole thing is because robes can trip you up, and so he tries to be a little unconventional. His name is Tim, or Timmy, and yeah, he was trained by a much crueler necromancer. And he has an apprentice who is an 11-year-old girl who likes to wear pink, and all of her like reanimated rats wear like pink and purple robes, which I do find kind of funny. Her ninja rats, by the way, they're ninja rats. They're not reanimated rats. They got gifted ninja rats by somebody else. So she has like these pink and purple outfits while her ninja rats and her reanimated zombies also wear pink and purple ones. But Timmy gets his corpses ethically, as ethically as you can get a corpse, by purchasing them from the families so that they have some money. Very odd. But, you know, you do what you got to do. And they get contracted by a council, hence the Beurocrat, to go and collect this fire elf, which is unusual, who is giving people some trouble with going through the forest, and to recruit her to join a team to help protect the kingdom because something bigger and badder is coming. And that's basically the first book. The second one is the Army of Golems. They're hunting out an army of golems inside a mountain that are like killing a bunch of people, and they have to bring in someone else. They end up finding a dragon egg at some point. It was just silly and enjoyable. Not really good, not really bad. Like, it passed the time. It actually has a 4.0 on Goodreads and a 3.81 on Storygraph, so if that tells you anything. Okay, so there's a crime drama that I read called, it's a series called the Cormac Riley series, and it's a detective in Ireland, just series. And I arguably enjoyed them. They were just mid. This was one of the prequels to it. So there's like 3 books out. There's The Ruin, The Scholar, and the last one doesn't have a name that follows that pattern, so I can't remember it. And I haven't listened to it yet. And then there's 2 prequels, The Sisters and The Roommate. And so The Sisters, it was on here as a 3. The other ones, I think I gave them like a 3.5, so they'll come up in a little bit. So this is a prequel about one of the cops that our detective works with, and a crime that she solved with her sister, who was a lawyer, before everything started. And it was fine. It was a novella crime procedural novel. I think for these, I just really liked the narrator, whose name I can't remember, and I probably won't pronounce very well because she has an Irish name, and I am not very good at pronouncing those.
Present The Sisters, written by Dervla McTiernan, performed by Aoife McMahon.
Aoife McMahon. I don't know if you heard that. Just pretend. I'll cut it out if you can't hear it. Yeah, so I just, the audio narrator, she's really good, and I like her voice. She does all of the ones in the series. So it's just a mid 3. It was a fine crime procedural. It's like, you know, sitting and watching hours of Law and Order or CSI or something like that just to pass the time. It passes the time. One that I expected to be a little bit higher is Africa Risen. Africa Risen is an anthology of short stories written by Black authors. And a lot of them are based in African mythologies or Afrofuturism, and some of them really did well for me, and some of them really didn't. Some of them really fell flat for me. So on average, it was about a 3. There were some 5s in here. There was one, I can't remember what it was called. I should probably pull up my story graph and tell you. Hold on. Okay, so the few in here that I really liked were Mommy Wada Works, which was a post-apocalyptic dystopian with climate change and talking about ableism and a mother-daughter relationship. It was really short. It was like 30-40 pages, but it packed all of that in really, really well. And I really enjoyed it. I've been really liking climate change anxiety books this year, which is terrible. But I like that aspect of it, and bringing in all of like the sci-fi tech to collect rainwater and things like that. There was another 4. That was a 4 for me. Another 4 was Housewarming for a Lion Goddess. This was told parts in recipes. There's a lion goddess, and we know from the beginning that she's actually this lion goddess, and she's in human form, and she's having this housewarming party for her new apartment, and she's talking about the recipes she's going to make. And so she's going through the recipes, having flashbacks to when she was the lion goddess, talking about her dreams and talking about the present day. And it was very fever dreamy, and really visually compelling and like super well narrated. And it was about like the relationship that she's having with the current man and how she's justifying that with her relationship with her lion goddess. And I really, really enjoyed that one. A lot of them focused around Christian religion, and those ones didn't necessarily work for me. Africa Risen. It was just that there were a couple that were DNFs, and that just brought the average down. Overall, like, I really recommend checking it out. It was a good collection of speculative stories mixed between sci-fi and fantasy. An unexpected one, I think my rating is a little lower than most people's for this, and that was Dracula. I read it for the first time this year, and it was a 3 for me. The story itself is good. The characters are good. It's just the writing style feels very slow and draggy for me. I do want to give it another go. Looking at it, I think there's some like reader's guides that you can use to like get some different themes and stuff out of it. So I might give it a go again while following one of those, just to see another interpretation of it. I did like the fact a group of people who have uncovered the plan of a vampire to come to London and set up shop, essentially. And it's their tale of taking him down, all told in epistolary form between letters and journal entries and recorded journals. I liked the formatting, and I liked the way the audio narrator did that. A lot of these I listened to, but we are about to get into the ones that I did read physically. So a lot of these are audio books that were just really mids, because I'm more willing, I am more willing to throw some time into an audiobook and waste time doing that, because I could do other things than I am to like waste time reading a book that I think is going to be mid. I'm getting better at picking ones that I don't think will be mid as far as physically reading. So anyway, tangent over. So I really liked some of the stuff in it, and some of the other stuff, it was just not a tone that I really enjoy or a pacing that I really enjoy. So it was fine, but I didn't find it to be like, you know, anything amazing. So I did like the fact that all the men were so concerned with Mina's safety. He's deciding to play now. They were so concerned with Mina's safety that they actually put her in harm's way, trying to protect her, to be like, no, it's going to be too scary for you, just stay here. And that puts her in harm's way. And I found that really funny. And I feel like that was done on purpose. So I did like that. Okay. For the wolf, I read Physically. This was about a woman who is destined to be sacrificed to the beast in the woods. And then it is her relationship with the beast in the woods. There was a lot of blood magic in here, which was fine, but I didn't really like the way it was done because it didn't really make a lot of sense, I guess. The rules were unclear, and I don't like when magic is unclear on the rules. Our main character was like determined to be a martyr, which was, I know she was supposed to be a sacrifice, but she was like determined to like just give up even when she had the chance to be free. Like the beast guy was like, oh, you can be free, and she was like, no, I'm a harm, I'm a danger to everyone. She was just like really like self-loathing, and it was really too much for me, just her personality. And then it was they really tried to do the enemies to lovers. This is by Hannah Whitten. She really tried to do the enemies to lovers, and there was it's based on Beauty and the Beast, and so a lot of the scenes that you'd expect, you know, where Belle comes to love the beast and the beast comes to love her and all those things happen, didn't really hit the same way that they were supposed to, I think, for me. And then it was mostly a romance than it was more a romance than it was a fantasy, and so it had that third act breakup thing. And I was texting my friend like, what is with all the miscommunication in romances? She was like, it's just a trope. Like, it's just, you just have to accept that people in romance books, because she reads a lot of romance, they don't communicate like normal people. So that was, I just didn't like the dialogue, the communication style. It just wasn't for me, but it was fine otherwise. It wasn't like egregiously terribly written. It was fine. It just wasn't for me. And then the next one is interesting. So this is another physical read. Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor. This is one that I liked the premise a lot. I liked the Afrofuturism. I liked the like big conversation we were having about racism and sexism and classism and colorism and all this. I liked that conversation. I struggled with the romance part of it. So we're following Anya Sanwoo, who is hold on. He has had this bone since Christmas Eve. It was his Christmas Eve gift, and he has refused to chew on it, and he is now choosing to chew on it. And I don't want to tell him to stop. So I just turned and looked at him and was like, now? Really? You choose now? Because I want him to feel comfortable chewing on things, because the dogs at my parents' house used to take everything from him, so this is a struggle. But I know he's doing it because he wants to go on a walk, even though we just went on a walk. Okay. Enough about my problems with my toddler dog. My 12-year-old toddler dog, but border collies are always toddlers. Okay, so Who Fears Death follows Anya Sanwoo. Anya Sanwoo, who is the mixed race daughter born of assault. And she is decided, after she learns the story of her conception, that she will kill her father. And she needs to be a powerful magician to do this. I really hope this isn't too loud. She needs to be a powerful magician to do this. So she basically convinces, after constant pressure and rejection, the local magician, I think they might be called warlocks, I can't remember, or wizards, I honestly don't remember what they're called, convinces him to take her on. And in that, she meets the boy that she falls in love with, Mwita? Mwita. I was always putting the W after it and saying it Mitwa, but I don't think that's right. It's Mitwa. Mwita. Mwita. So he is been trying to become a magician, and he failed the test. You have to pass this test, and he failed it. And when Anya Sanwoo finally gets the chance to take the test, she passes the test. And then after that, like, her and this boy, because they are like, I think in the beginning she's like 14 and he's like 16, they like start a romantic relationship. And at the whole time though, he's like pissed at her that she doesn't know what he knows and doesn't know enough, yet she's the magician. And I'm like, boy, like, child, person, human, please gather some, like, empathy for the fact that you have had, like, 10 years of training. I think it's more like 5 or 6, to her, like, 6 months. Of course you know more than her, but he's constantly, like, on her about it, and he's very sexist in his determination of gender roles, which is in line with the society at the time. But Anya-san, or the setting that we're going with, but Anya-san was very much against that, but she just accepts it in him so easily. She only fights back with him a couple of times, and then the way it wraps up in the ending with her relationship with him and how she deals with that, and it's just that aspect of it. Like, we were supposed to be like, oh, there's, like, it was like told to us that they are so in love, they're soulmates, they're perfect matches, but all we see is him treating her like crap and her accepting it. Like, there was a point where a group of men tried to assault her in an alleyway. There's a lot of sexual assault in this book. I don't recommend it if you are sensitive to that, because there is a very, very explicit sexual assault scene that just goes on and on in like the first 80 pages. And I read it first thing in the morning, not expecting that. And I hadn't even had a cup of coffee yet. It was rough. So if you're sensitive to those things, I don't recommend reading this. So there's a scene where some people attempt to do that to her because of the fact that she's mixed race. She's more of a target for that. She's viewed as less than livestock, essentially, because of her mixed race status. And she violently reacts and fights them off. And this boyfriend, who is almost husband at this point, is like, you shouldn't have reacted in anger because that makes them as bad. That makes you as bad as them. And I was like, I will end you for saying that. And like, she's like, oh, okay, I do need to stop being so angry. And I'm like, what? Like, and it was never really like pushed back on. It was always like everyone telling her, you're just such an angry person, so we keep things from you. And they kept keeping things from her and keeping things from her and keeping things from her. And then being upset when she got angry that they kept things from her and being like, see, this is why we don't tell you, because you just get angry. And I was like, I'm angry for her. Like, I didn't understand where Okorafor was trying to go with this. Like, are we supposed to believe everyone around that, yeah, she's just too angry? Are we supposed to be angry for her at her friends and fiance, boyfriend, husband? Or I was very confused with that. So that's kind of why it was a 3. But be prepared if you read it. It's a good book, but be prepared if you read it. And there are things that I didn't like. So now that I have spent way too long talking about my 3s, so the 3.25s, these are, okay, so 2 of them are Stephen King's, and I talked about these in my Stephen King video, so I'm not going to talk about them right now. It's Rose Madder and Lisey's story. Mostly they were fine. So I'm not going to talk about those ones right now. You can watch that video if you want to see my opinions on those too. Little Darlings is an interesting audiobook that I picked up, another Irish one, and it is based on the idea of changelings. This woman has a bit of a postpartum psychosis and believes that her offspring are now changelings, and the way the story is told to us is we don't know if she's right or not. And it was intriguing, but it just wasn't, it never did what it was trying to do. Like, it was spooky and eerie, but it never really like went for it. It was kind of pulled back. So that one, it was mostly okay. These are all mostly okay. Hooked by A.C. Wise. This is not the spicy one. This is a retelling of Peter Pan, if Peter was the villain, but Hook was kind of also a villain, and he escaped Neverland right before World War II, went back to London, and the crocodile figured out how to follow him through. Hook was also gay in this one, which is fine. It was not a whole lot was really done with it, except for the fact that he could never tell the love of his life that he loved him because he couldn't use the word love and couldn't really admit for a very long time that he was into this guy. It was fine. Using the war setting, like, she could have done a lot more with it, and she really didn't, so I didn't see the point of setting it like months before World War II started. I didn't see the point in it because it didn't have a lot to do with the story. There was also just a weird thing where the author contemplated whether or not crocodiles were saltwater. And saltwater crocodiles are like a big thing. So I was very confused why we were talking about how crocodiles don't even live in saltwater. And I was like, they do though. So yeah, that was the thing. I think that just kind of brought it down for me. And then Morgan Is My Name was a feminist retelling of King Arthur. It's the first in a series, I think is going to be 3 or 4 books, with Morgan Le Fay being the main character. So this is her from like childhood up to like mid-teens. I think she's 16 when it ends. And with a retelling from that. And I don't know how I felt about... Well, I do. It's a very long story how I felt about it. I actually did a whole video on my other channel that I might redo. But basically it wasn't, I don't think it was feminist, and it made me go read another book, which I don't think that one's on there. So I don't think it was necessarily feminism, because we did a lot of shitting on other women. We did a lot of shitting on women who chose to be mothers, and instead of like, we did a lot of shitting on women. It was like more like not like other girls than it was feminism to me. That's how I interpreted it. It has a 4.19 and a 4.17 on Goodreads and Storygraph. So take that with what you will. All right. Songs of Love and Death is an anthology of short stories for fantasy and sci-fi. I did a whole video on it. You can check that one out. That was a 3.5. So then we have The Roommate, The Ruin, and The Scholar. These are the other 3 books in that Dervla McTiernan, Cormac Riley. Cormac McCarthy is the horror author. Cormac Riley is the detective. They all follow Cormac through different cases. Very procedural, crime procedural, but set in Ireland, and it was enjoyable for me to escape to Ireland for a little while. And then we have Stranger in the Woods. So after escaping to Ireland, I decided to escape to the Scottish Highlands with an Australian author who had an Australian character go work in the Highlands as a photographer, where she uncovers a weird mystery that includes her, because she doesn't realize she's ever been to Scotland, and turns out, I know maybe some people think she has. And it was a very convoluted, very twisty-turny. Every time I thought they were done with the last twist, there was another fucking twist. Fine. Nothing special. But very vibey, very Scottish Highlands vibey, and that's honestly what made me happy. Okay, so then I have an anthology of manga that my nibbling picked out for me. These are all diverse stories. They were fine. There's a bunch of different ones. There's some sci-fi, some fantasy. There's a battle royale of African animals. My favorite one was Benedict Nick, the Incredible Brick, or something like that. It's just a brick. Like, he's literally a brick doing stuff, trying to save people. There was like a short comic like on the website where he gets a box of cereal off a high shelf for a woman, and I was like, I really enjoy this. I don't know why, but it just kind of, it fed me just some calmness that I enjoyed. Doggo, you're okay. The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is a Carrie retelling, which from my memory of Carrie, this does follow really closely. I think I didn't like this as much because I just also didn't really like Carrie as much. It's fine. How many times am I going to say it's fine? It was, the thing that got me was the way, it's a YA retelling of Carrie, okay? So I think it's just the way the characters interacted with each other wasn't doing it for me. And we literally had the line, but she's not like other girls. And I was like, why do we got to do this? Why do we got to do this in 2021 when this book was probably written? Why do we need to keep using this language? The actual phrase. Yeah, it was just, I liked that instead of like the newspaper articles and stuff from Carrie, this was a podcast. We were talking about telekinesis. It even referenced Stephen King, which was really funny. There was some really good stuff in it, but it was just overall, it was just fine. didn't feel any different after reading it. So then that puts us up to the 3.75s, and these are ones that were okay. They just missed something. So one of them is in the top 10 lowest books I've read on according to Goodreads. I'll talk about that one first, I guess, because that's The Bookshop and the Barbarian by Morgan Stang. That it was just fine. Like, it's a cozy, inspired by Legends and Lattes. It references Legends and Lattes. It's a story about a woman who is escaping to this small town to open a bookshop, and she meets a barbarian because she needs a murder hobo to get the hibernating goblins out of her shop. And your goblins are a protected species because they've been murder hoboed by so many D&D groups. Because if you've ever played D&D, the first horde that attacks you is usually goblins because they don't have a lot of HP, but they can do a fair amount of damage. And when you're a little tiny first level player, they work. So this is very based in D&D type of ideas, including using the word murder hobo, which is a D&D player who just decides they're going to go around smashing and killing regardless of what the story is, the story that's trying to be told is trying to do. They're very annoying to play with. And that was kind of the joke in the book. I think there's a lot of D&D jokes sprinkled in here that maybe if you've never played D&D, you might not get, or you might get if you consume a lot of internet content. But yeah, it's very fall. It goes from fall to winter. When we first get introduced to the town, it's full of pumpkins. So yeah, fine. Yeah, it's sapphic. The murder hobo that she hires is a woman, a large barbarian woman. And that was also fine. The one thing I didn't like was the large barbarian woman didn't know how to read, and I was like, that's kind of dumb. Like, okay. Let's do Deadbeat Druid. So I can't say too much about this. This is the final in a series, YA urban fantasy series about a young man who becomes a warlock and ends up having to hunt down family secrets while dealing with the fact that he has, like, heart-bound himself to another man that he does fall in love with. Cute, fun, lighthearted, even though we're killing a lot of things. So enjoyable. It was fine. The other two books are better. The last one, I think, is the worst of the group, but it's the highest rated on Goodreads. I just like the first one the best, which is called White Trash Warlock. That's why I picked it, because it had a weird name. Bloodbound by Patricia Briggs is the second book in the Mercy Thompson series. The first three books, I actually thought she did something interesting. So the first book is Mooncalled, and we introduced the werewolves. This is a urban fantasy set on the east side of Washington State. My boyfriend loves it. He wanted me to read it, and because it's set in Washington, I was like, all right, fine. I'll give your urban fantasy werewolf romance a chance. It's fine. So Bloodbound Mooncalled introduces the werewolves and their society. Bloodbound introduces the vampires, more of the vampires and their society and their politics. And I liked this one more than Mooncalled because I really liked the vampire society and the politics of it. We get more interaction between the vampire and werewolf society. And then the third book, which I rated higher, actually introduces more of the Fae society. So we have werewolf, vampires, and Fae. And then I guess as the series goes on, we get more things introduced. So this is set in a world where these other paranormal beings have been discovered to be real. Okay, so we're running out of space and had to make some more. So, yeah, Bloodbound does some interesting things, but it was still, Mercy is still a little too, girls don't like me because I'm just too masculine type of thing, while also, yeah, I have some issues, but I've been told she gets better. Yeah, it's fine. They're easy to read, they're quick, and yeah. Okay, but do check the content warnings on the third book. Bryony and Roses. First is actually one I just recently finished. It's a T. Kingfisher romantasy. It's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and I feel like For the Wolf could have been better. like this one was fine. This one was better. It was a Beauty and the Beast retelling. So we have Bryony. She likes gardening, and she stumbles along upon this manor, and she tries to steal a rose. And when she tries to steal the rose, she gets told she can't leave, and by the beast. And so she gives her like a week to go back home and get her shit settled, and then she's got to come back. And so she comes back with a shit ton of plants, and he's like, oh, okay. And they fall in love. Beauty and the Beast. It was cute. It was fine. It was cute. It was fine. I don't know how many times I'm going to be like, it was fine. And then another one I just finished. This is, I think, the second book in a trilogy. I finished the Dispatcher trilogy by John Scalzi. They're all on Audible as Audible originals. And so they were short novellas, and I needed something to get me through the craziness of the holidays. So they were The Dispatcher, Murder by Other Means, and Travel by Bullet are the three. I liked the first two better. So this is set in a sci-fi version of our current day where people just started not dying if they were murdered. Accidental deaths, suicides, and natural deaths, people still stay dead. But murder, people come back. And so you have, so these dudes, their job is to dispatch people. So we are introduced to the dispatcher, Tony Valdez, while he is in an operating room, because his job is if the operation starts going bad, he dispatches the person by essentially killing them in a medical way, so that when they don't actually die, they disappear and they wake up at home in their bed as if nothing in the last 12 to 30 hours ever happened to them, which is a very interesting concept. So you get, of course, the wealthy people abusing that. We got like frat guys having sword fights. We got college kids wanting to be thrown off water towers. We got like all sorts of like weird shit happening. We've got people purposefully ODing so that they can be like, if they have somebody else administer the dose, they can get that like wild high and then experience it and then not die. And these are all mostly rich people, like, because they can afford to under the table pay the dispatchers to do it, because the dispatchers have a license from the government to do these things, though those things are a morally gray area. So it's kind of, that's the premise for the world. And we get our dispatcher, Tony Valdez, ended up working with the police to solve some crimes. So we get a crime procedural, which are my comfort place because of the era I grew up in. I grew up with Law and Order and CSI and fucking, what's the NCIS, which are so problematic today, but I grew up with them. And yeah, so they're like a comfort, they're comfort food. So that was fine. The second one was so mid, I don't even remember what the mystery was. The second one, the mystery was, these are also narrated by Zachary Quinto, so the narrator is good. Oh, this is the one where he does something sketchy. Okay, so he does something sketchy, and that kind of sets very wealthy people on his back. And he's trying to escape that while figuring out why people around him are dying. So, there's 3 of these. I don't know if there's going to be more. They're fine. Okay, very last one is The Bone Witch by Rinch Pecco. So this one is my least favorite in the trilogy, but it's the introduction, and so it's kind of info dumpy, and that's kind of why it was a little lower for me, it was just really info dumpy. I've talked about this series plenty of times. We follow an Asha, which is a magic user in this world. They are always women. And because when men have magical powers, they become part of the military. And I can't remember what they call them. But the women become Ashas, and essentially most Ashas can use elemental magic, but they have one element that works better for them, except for the Dark Ashas. The Dark Ashas are necromancers, and they are called derogatorily bone witches. And our main character discovers that she's a necromancer at the age of like 11, when her brother dies. Her brother, who's a soldier, dies, and she raises him from the dead and freaks the fuck out of her town and family. But there happens to be a Dark Asha in the area who takes her and her now familiar brother under her wing. And then we get her learning everything that the Ashas have to learn, which is like politics and world history and all these like songs and dances, because they end up being entertainment for wealthy men. But they also will do some healing, and the Dark Ashas hunt these raised beasts, and who only rise like on a cycle based on what species they are. They like rise every so many years, and only the Dark Ashas can take them down, essentially. So they do perform other things, but that is mostly what they do, is entertainment. And we get our main character, Taya, kind of being against some of the rules of the world, with how magic is used and how the Dark Ashas are essentially just drained of their powers over time, and they have a shorter life expectancy than all the rest of the Ashas. And so we get her deciding that she's going to change that as the story goes on. So this is all the world building and introduction, how the magic works. The magic system is very set. Having read a lot more of Rincha Pecco's books after this, I think they tend to have a little bit slower pacing. Well, the pacing is inconsistent. It'll be like really fast and then kind of almost dragging slow. So this one definitely suffers from that same thing, where sometimes the pacing, we get like a battle and then it just drags and drags and drags and drags, and then we get a battle and it drags and drags. The series does get better if you can go through the introductory aspect of it. So those are my, how many? 26? Those are my 26 mids for the mid books. So I do have some favorites of these. Obviously, I continue to some of the series. But yeah, I think it's fun to just talk about things that were fine. It's fine. And it's enjoyable just for what it is. It's not life-changing, and I didn't hate it. It's enjoyable. I am going to get this squeaky dog dinner, because that's what he's been having a tantrum about. Oh, you can't see him behind the chair. He's been having a tantrum, because that's what border collies do. So I will see you soon. I hope you all had a great Christmas. That's why this is delayed, is because I had a lot of family shit to do. So thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking around. If you stuck around till the end, tell me which, if any of these you like or were your favorites. And I'll see you next time.